That would be me.
Look who we're hanging with.
Jason David Frank.
Boom shakalaka.
Please do not change channel.
Hello, World Wide Web. Welcome to the Hangin' With Web Show. I'm GW Pomichter. We are at Authors in a Box at the Indian River Mall in Vero, Florida, and we're hanging right now with author Marc Barie, the author of War Calls and Love Cries. Everyone on Facebook and YouTube and all of social media understands that sentence way better than they should. How you doing, man?
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks for coming to hang with us.
I'm doing well. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
okay, so War Calls, Love Cries.
It was a book inspired by my wife, believe it or not, who one day walked into the living room and announced that my second great-grandfather fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
And he was with the Adirondack Regiment in upstate New York, and that's how I gave birth to my very first novel. I wrote about it.
Fantastic.
Had a lot of fun, too.
The Adirondack Regiment. Wow.
He was all over the place, and the book is historically accurate. It follows the footsteps of the Adirondack Regiment, but as one who's written local history books in the past and was a slave to footnotes, I had a blast on this one because I had no footnotes and I could give him a wife, a treacherous brother, a stint in prison, and even a shattered leg. So it was a lot of fun.
That's what writers do. That's right. We ruin lives on paper, and you love it. Okay, so are you from that area?
Yes, I'm originally from upstate New York, a little town called Champlain, which is right on the Canadian border, next to the corner of Vermont and Quebec and New York.
Wow.
And about 2,300 people on a good day.
I'm from Utica.
Oh, there you go.
Utica,
You're
so
about 5 hours on the other
actually, my
side.
mom has a camp in the Adirondack.
Well, Utica's a little bit bigger than Rouse's Point in Champlain.
Yeah.
Well,
it was at one time.
Well, when we had 3 cars in a row, we called that the 4th of July parade, so that's how small it was.
I love it. You know, writing a historical fiction novel is a lot about knowing the history. What was the most interesting or fun thing that you learned doing the research for that?
Well, you know, since I've written the book, I've developed and put together a speech, if you will, on, I think it's 6 amazing facts about the Civil War that will shock you. And in the process of doing the research in the book, I found out things that I didn't know. I'm a big fan of Abraham Lincoln, for example. And I found out that about 9 months before he was actually assassinated, somebody else shot at him. I didn't know this.
Oh, wow, I didn't either.
He had, I'll tell you very quickly, he had a habit of going from the White House to the Soldiers' Home, which is a short horse ride away. And he also had a habit of losing his security detail. And one night, about 9 months before he was actually killed, he was riding alone on his horse with a stovetop hat, and somebody took a shot at him. And the hat flew off, the horse took off, he almost fell off the horse. He managed to get to the Soldiers' Home, told his security guards about it, a few friends. They went back on the road and they found nothing except his hat with a hole in it.
Wow.
True story.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, in today's world, it's really funny because we think of the Secret Service that has formed, and I don't think a lot of people realize that the modern Secret Service is a direct result of those stories.
That's when it was
because
born.
You know, Abraham Lincoln is a great example because he had a very definitive profile wherever he went. He wore the stovetop hat.
He had a black shawl.
He had the black shawl.
Yep.
So he was very, you could always tell that was your president. In a time when we didn't have mass media, so it wasn't like you knew it was the guy on the news.
The only reason he had a security detail is their country was at war. And frankly, the Confederate troops were all around Washington.
Yeah,
they had to have something.
yeah. Well, you're near Virginia.
But those kinds of stories made writing the book a blast.
Wow.
For example, I discovered that you probably remember that after he was shot, at Ford Theater, they brought him across the way to a little boarding house called the Peterson House.
Yes.
Some people know about the Peterson House. Did you know that 2 years earlier, that boarding house rented that very same room to an actor named Warwick, who one night told his friend he could stay there, and his friend stayed the night and slept in the very same bed where Lincoln died. And that actor friend was named John Wilkes Booth.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
That is.
True story, documented it.
Now that's the definition of a small world.
It's all in the book.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Check out Warhol's Love Cries. Okay, so this is your first book.
It's my first novel. I wrote 2 biographies of people up in upstate New York.
Okay.
And then my wife and I co-authored 2 local history books, one on the history of the town we came from, and one on the history of another town, the whole border actually, the U.S.-Canadian border. And so that was fun. I enjoyed working with my wife on that.
What draws you to a given period in history?
You know, that's an interesting question, Garrett. I've always been fond of history and political science. That was my major when I was in college. That's when I got my undergraduate degree, and then I got serious and got a master's degree in business. But I've always loved history. I've always loved politics. I'm just naturally drawn to it. But I blame my wife for infecting me with a love of history. She started with the genealogy, the local history, and we went back hundreds of years, and it was just fun to write about. But after 4 books and thousands of footnotes, it was just such a relief to write something you can make up as you go along,
yes.
Except for the history part.
Exactly. Well, you know, historical fiction is always fun because you can always find a historical fact, a historical nugget that lends itself to building a fictional story around it.
Yes, it is. That's exactly the case.
You know, when you look at things like in modern theater, a lot of our younger YouTube viewers or whatever will know things like National Treasure, where you can take and build an adventure around these tiny historical nuggets.
Yeah.
And you can do a little teaching. At the same time, you can have a lot of fun.
Yep.
Which is one of the things that writers love about what we do is the fact that we immerse ourselves in our own worlds for a short period of time. And it's kind of like dreaming when you're conscious, because as you dream it, you're like, no, I don't like that. We're going to change that a little bit.
And I think you're typical of most people because you appreciate the history of the book. I recently did a little speaking engagement in front of a Rotary Club, which happened to be, the audience was filled with veterans. And they very much appreciated the history of the war. One of the things I learned, for example, was that if you take World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam War, you still would not have as many people that were killed in the Civil War. Over 600,000 people, and only 1/3 of them died from the wounds. The other 2/3 died from disease. Well, that particular audience, which had a half a dozen veterans in it, they were mesmerized by that. And after the speech, they all came up to me, they got books, and it was a lot of fun. I think most people appreciate history, and many people are fascinated by it.
Well, I think a lot of times people get lost in their everyday lives, and I think a lot of times we start to look around ourselves and we see right here in our own country in America, you know, we get up in the morning, we can go to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee or a cup of coffee, and then we go about our business, and life is routinely very peaceful, very passive. You know, you can either watch it go by or you can get out there and be active, and you have a choice. I don't think people understand a lot of times until they hear from a historian that the path to where we live was bloody and violent, and the birthing a nation is like birthing a child.
Yes.
And it is bloody and violent and horrific, and then one day you look and there's this beautiful thing in front of you, this life that you live. Right. I tell people all the time, as in our generation and the generations of my children and my grandchildren, you all won the genetic lottery. You were born at the right time in the right place, where life is this thing that we have.
But I have to say, Garrett, present company excluded, much of television these days, whether it's online or on your TV, is intellectually, it's a wasteland. I mean, these sitcoms,
the only people who can, I tell people all the time, TV, films, even some literature today, if you have an academic mind, you can find what you're looking for. But if you don't,
oh my God,
it's not in your face.
Yeah,
it's
a garbage dump.
There's so much stuff out there. I tell people all the time, I love, even the average sitcom, there's so much satire and so much happening in that story that 90% of its audience will never know and never get. If you don't look at it with a critical mind or an academic mind, then those things go right by you. I used to kind of look down at things like my son, when he was in his teens, would say, I want to watch South Park. And I'd be like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And then I watched it.
My kids love that too.
And then I watched it though. I watched it and the academic in me kicked in and I said, oh my Lord.
There is some satire.
The number of, pure satire. Now, from a teenager's perspective, it's just fun.
I think I had in mind
fun.
most of the reality shows. Which I think are patently ridiculous.
I will say this, and I mean no disrespect to Hollywood or to my peers out there in filmmaking. If you didn't have to have a writer to create your world, you took the lazy way out. There is some entertainment in reality, but what we do, like writing a historical fiction novel, what we do is important to bringing the. I tell people all the time, I was a journalist, I tell the facts.
Yeah, sure.
The writer in me wants to tell truth.
Well,
and truth and fact are so different.
I'm sure that makes you a very happy man. I happen to be in the best of all worlds from the business community. I know how and I love to market. I've always enjoyed history and I've always enjoyed writing. It's been a passion. So I get up every morning as if my hair were on fire and I have a choice between marketing or writing or research, and all three alternatives are fine. Unfortunately, that's not always the case in the publishing business.
No.
You meet some authors who are trying to make a living doing it. Thank goodness. I retired. I made my money before I started writing books. And so you go to these writers' conferences, and no offense to my fellow writers, but some of them look like a deer caught in the headlights.
I always tell my writers, I always love the first-time published author, because when you look at their eyes, you can see the hope that hasn't been dashed yet.
Right. Well, I came to it with a good dose of realism. I've got a very good publisher that picked me up, Barie Publishing out of Naples. And
as a writer
I don't have to make a living doing that.
As a writer and a historian, if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead in history, and just pick their brains.
Charles Krauthammer.
Wow.
That was easy.
And what would be the discussion at dinner?
How he writes. He, along with another hero of mine, a guy named Bill Buckley, both of whom are deceased now, they are some of the best writers I've ever seen. You read their book with your dictionary in one hand and the book in the other hand, and they just...
And you're happy to do that.
Yes, certainly. I learn new words all the time. They were just good writers. They turned words into music, and I enjoy that. And it's so rare. And there are a lot of historical figures, including my hero Abraham Lincoln, my other hero Winston Churchill. I'd love to have lunch with. But frankly, they're not going to teach me how to write better. And that's what I'd like to learn right now.
And you know what? It is the most amazing thing. A good writer strives for that.
Yes.
To turn words into music. There's a melody to the spoken word and to the written word. And words have power and meaning.
Sure.
And if you could infuse your stories with those words and that power and that meaning,
I agree with that.
we will all have been successful in some way, right? If we can ever do that. We have to wrap it up, folks. We've been hanging with author Marc Barie, the author of War Calls, Love Cries. Check that out. We're going to put links down below. As we wrap it up, we want to say thank you to our partners and our friends at Something Unique Magazine, Space Coast Comics, Famous Faces and Funnies, Off the Chain Radio with author Yvonne Mason, our good friends at Pound the Grape in Melbourne, Florida. We want to thank them for their support. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you hit subscribe, log on, tune in, and see who we're hanging with next.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. Yes, sir.